Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For purposes of debate only, I yield the customary 30 minutes to the gentleman from California, Mr. Dreyer. All time yielded during consideration of the rule is for debate only. I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days within which to revise and extend their remarks and insert extraneous materials into the record.
Objection, so ordered.
I yield myself such time as I may consume. Mr. Speaker, I rise today as a member of the Rules Committee and the fiscally conservative Blue Dog Coalition and a proud supporter of this rule H.R. 2920, the Statutory Pay-As-You-Go bill. When the 110th Congress convened in 2007, I strongly supported the reinstatement of the pay-as-you-go principles in the rules of the House. Today we will take up the next step toward reinstating the statutory pay-as-you-go rule. These statutory requirements helped turn deficits into surpluses during the 1990s under the Clinton administration. When the previous statute expired, Mr. Speaker, the result was a return to unchecked deficit spending, which doubled the national debt in less than a decade. This is not a Democratic problem, this is not a Republican problem, but rather this is a problem for all of us. The American people deserve better. We in Congress must be forced to balance our spending the same way that every American family does. We should not spend what we cannot afford. In order to spend a dollar, we must find a dollar, either in savings or in new revenue. Mr. Speaker, my colleagues on the other side of the aisle may try to argue semantics and say that this is an imperfect bill. If this is the case, I would simply remind my colleagues that every journey is completed one step at a time. This bill is just the first step. Rather, it is part of a clearly delineated path toward fiscal responsibility. To date, this Congress has passed critical pieces of legislation like expansion of the S-chip to provide health insurance to 11 million children, and we did so in a way that was completely paid for, showing our commitment to fiscal responsibility. Earlier this year, we adopted a budget resolution that placed the full cost of war spending on the books for the first time. These are steps in the right direction. This bill continues these important steps in the direction of fiscal responsibility. This legislation will require that all new policies reducing revenues or expanding spending enacted during a session of Congress be offset over a 5 and a 10 years. It will require any future extension of upper income tax cuts to be offset and force a serious examination of wasteful subsidies in the budget and tax loopholes that can be eliminated to offset more worthwhile programs. Finally, the statute would not be complete without an enforcement mechanism. The Congressional Budget Office will continue to score legislation passed by Congress. The Office of Management and Budget will keep a running scorecard for all of the revenue generated in new spending enacted during a year. If we have not fully offset the legislation enacted during the session, it will trigger an automatic sequester of funds from the mandatory spending programs. Mr. Speaker, the American people have spoken, and they want a return to fiscal responsibility that Congress abide by pay-as-you-go principles. This is the legislation that will make that a reality. As a member of the Blue Dog Coalition, I have worked since being elected to Congress to reenact statutory pay-go, and I strongly urge my fellow colleagues to vote for this rule in H.R. 2920. Thank you, and I reserve the balance of my time.